The Sigh is a great episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is the 7th episode of Season 7. It's directed by Zaks. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. This one starts off with Ray and Debra both trying to get washed in their bathroom. And Debra sighs quite loudly, and Ray jokes that he'll just give her the bathroom and he'll share the bathroom with the kids. And Debra lights up. Immediately, she thinks this is a fantastic idea, and she gets excited about having room for all of her stuff, such as having a curling iron always plugged in. Please don't leave your hot implements always plugged in. That's a terrible idea. Ray said that he would do it. Well, actually, he said he'd do it for the woman he's having sex with tonight. So everybody's happy. Ray gets sex. Debra gets a bathroom. We then cut to Ray using the children's bathroom, or trying to use it, the following morning. He is delayed because obviously they're using it. It's a mess, and he opens the cupboard, and it was beautifully executed. Just a whole bunch of stuff falls out of it, which honestly didn't seem that safe for a children's bathroom. I'm not entirely sure what fell out of it, but it was the kind of medicine cabinet, so not the safest. But either way, clearly Ray is not happy with his decision, and Debra is actually showing off the changes she made to Marie, and the bathroom looked bigger. I'm not saying they made the set bigger. I'm sure they did, and I'm sure it's just the way I'm perceiving it. But with the changes she made, the space did genuinely look a lot bigger. Maybe it's the way they filmed it, I don't know. But it just looked like it had been transformed into a much more satisfying, less cramped environment. And I think they did a really good job of showing that. And it's a really nice moment between Marie and Debra where they're both really happy. And then Marie said that she did the same thing when Robert moved out. She took over the boys' bathroom. So she and Frank have their own bathrooms. And it kind of suggests that maybe Ray and Debra are turning into Marie and Frank, which I rather enjoyed. Ray then tries to use Debra's bathroom, but it's too cluttered, and I have to say there is a lot of stuff out on that bathroom. It would drive me insane, and it must be very difficult to clean. It looks great, but not very practical, and Ray realises he can't do anything here either, so he goes downstairs to the kitchen. And as he's shaving at the sink, Frank and Robert come in, and Ray then does his hair looking at his reflection in the toaster, and Frank tells him to take back the house, which is not a helpful attitude, but at the same time, Frank does have a point to an extent. Debra didn't necessarily kick Ray out of the bathroom, but he did feel like she was wanting him to leave the bathroom, and he felt pressured to do it, maybe. And sure, he could have stood his ground and said no. But I do think that Ray has a right to use that bathroom as much as Debra does. If the alternative is shaving at the sink in the kitchen, it's not a great idea. And then Robert tries to comfort Ray by running him a hot bath in the sink, which I thought was fabulous. It's a really great scene. I do think there are some good points raised, but a lot of the points are very exaggerated because of Frank. So some good points, but maybe not the most helpful attitude. Ray is then in his office down in the basement, and Debra is on the phone, getting in his way. She's looking for something while Ray is trying to work, and Ray sighs the way Debra did. Debra is on the phone, and I have to admit, while Debra was being unreasonable, she demands the bathroom space for herself. Well, maybe demands is too strong a word. It did seem like Ray had genuinely offered, but nevertheless, she thinks she can have that space. But now she's encroaching on Ray's space with no regard for the fact that he's working. So I don't agree with her actions, but I also on this occasion don't agree with Ray, because Ray stood up and basically yelled at her to get out while she was on the phone. That would have been mortifying. And Debra does leave, and I don't agree with what Ray did. And they then go up to Debra's bathroom, and Debra asked Ray how all of this came about anyway, and he happened to mention, well, it was when you sighed. And Debra said it was just a sigh. And she obviously explains that Ray needs to communicate better, and she says to him, you should always mean what you say. To which Ray responds, you should always mean what you sigh. Which I thought was a brilliant line, a little corny, but I really enjoyed it. And then we have an amazing bit of comedy from Ray Romano as he's impersonating Debra sneezing, because he's going on about how she always has to control everything, and she even controls her sneezes, as she does this thing where she kind of half sneezes and stops it. And he does this, I didn't count, but it must have been at least 10 times, maybe 15. And his facial expression is just so funny. I absolutely loved it. But I also kind of felt personally attacked as I do the same thing. So I felt a little attacked. It also made me wonder if that's what I look like when I do that. But I found it to be very funny. Absolutely my highlight of the episode. And then Debra does this bizarre sneezing Broadway musical finale performance. It's a very chaotic scene and it's so fun. And Debra then tells Ray to get out. She threatens him with the shower. She turns the shower on, they both get very wet. Ray takes the shower head, and it does for a moment seem like he's about to put it back. He's about to be the sensible one. Nuh-uh. He turns it back around on Debra, and then the kids walk in, and he sprays the children, and it was a good way to diffuse the situation. I thought it worked really well. They didn't really have a proper discussion about things. I think that would have been a bit more satisfying to come to a more satisfying, beneficial conclusion for everybody. We end with a joke with Ray and one of the boys as action figures, which apparently helped them move things along in the bathroom, and Ray tried it and said that it didn't work. It was a fine enough way to end things. I didn't mind it. But I do think I personally would have preferred a more satisfying conclusion and maybe one that had a bit more compromise. I mean, there is an easy compromise. Just don't try and brush your teeth at the same time. Maybe alternate. One of you can do something else while one of you brushes your teeth, and vice versa. You don't. It takes 3-4 minutes to do your teeth and get washed a couple of minutes extra. Maybe alternate. You don't have to do it at the exact same time. So it was not a difficult problem to solve, and the characters, not the show, but the characters made it way more complicated than it needed to be. And I like the fact that it was highlighting that a sigh doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. They also could have looked into that a little bit more, so there was a bit more potential, but at the same time, what we got was still fabulous. And just the image of Ray stopping his sneezes to mock Debra, the image of that is just absolutely fantastic. It's a great episode. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. So many great moments. The Sigh is definitely a brilliant episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. Very, very, very funny. I think quite relatable for a lot of people. That being said, that's kind of why I feel like we needed a slightly more satisfying conclusion so that anybody in a similar situation could maybe learn something that could be quite beneficial for them. But again, it was still a very, very entertaining episode, and needless to say, it's one that I thought was fabulously funny, very well written, wonderful performances, and definitely an episode that I'm sure I'll always really thoroughly enjoy.